It began as the kind of story people dream about. One man, two lottery wins. Anthony Miller was an ordinary mechanic from Ohio, a quiet father of three who worked long hours, fixing cars and scraping together enough to cover bills. His luck seemed to change overnight when he scratched off a ticket and won $2.3 million. Overnight, Anthony went from paycheck to paycheck to wealthy. The local news called him the luckiest man in town. But then, lightning struck twice. Just 4 years later, Anthony bought another ticket on a whim and won again. This time, the prize was even bigger, $12 million. Reporters swarmed him. Strangers begged him for loans, and his face was splashed across every paper in the state. "It doesn't feel real," he told cameras, smiling nervously. "I just want to take care of my family." And he did. He moved his wife and kids into a sprawling brick mansion with a pool, bought them new cars, and set up college funds. For a while, it seemed like a fairy tale. But with fortune came envy. Old friends turned distant. Neighbors whispered. Anthony grew paranoid, installing cameras around the house, double-locking the doors, and telling his brother, "Money doesn't just change your life, it changes how people look at you." Then came the night that shattered everything. Police received a frantic 911 call from Anthony's home. A neighbor reported hearing screams, then silence. When officers entered the mansion, what they found inside would haunt them for the rest of their careers. Anthony Miller's entire family, his wife, his 3 children, even his elderly mother who lived with them, were all dead. The scene was brutal, calculated, and cold-blooded, and the man who had beaten impossible odds twice was now facing something far darker than bad luck. He was the sole survivor of a massacre that turned his dream life into a true crime nightmare. The massacre sent shockwaves across the country. The luckiest man alive had become the center of the most horrifying crime Ohio had seen in decades. News vans crowded the street outside Anthony Miller's mansion, their cameras capturing every tear-stained neighbor, every whispered rumor. Inside the crime scene, detectives struggled to process the brutality. Anthony's wife, Laura, had been found in the kitchen, slumped over the counter where she'd been preparing dinner. His 3 children, ages 8, 11, and 14, were discovered in their bedrooms. His elderly mother, Margaret, was in her armchair, the TV still flickering with static. Each victim had been executed quickly, shot at close range. There were no signs of forced entry. Whoever had done it either knew the family or had been let in willingly. Anthony himself was found in the living room, covered in blood but alive. Shaking, incoherent, he told officers he had been in the basement, grabbing wine when the shots rang out. By the time he rushed upstairs, it was too late. Detectives began their investigation by looking outward. Who would want to hurt a family that seemed to have it all? The answer, they soon realized, was almost anyone. In the years since his second win, Anthony had been flooded with requests for money. Strangers mailed letters, begging for help. Distant relatives suddenly reappeared, and even neighbors hinted at loans. Anthony, generous to a fault, gave often. But he had also started refusing people, friends, cousins, even a brother-in-law who became bitter when the money stopped. One neighbor told police he'd say he didn't trust anyone anymore. He said winning was a curse. Adding to suspicion was Anthony's sudden obsession with security. He had installed high-end cameras, motion sensors, and reinforced locks. Yet, on the night of the murders, none of the cameras were working. Investigators discovered the system had been deliberately disabled just hours before the killings. That detail changed everything. Whoever had entered the house knew exactly what they were doing. And though police searched for an outside suspect, a jealous relative, a spurned friend, maybe even a stranger looking for cash, the community couldn't ignore a darker possibility. What if the only survivor, Anthony Miller himself, wasn't as lucky as he seemed? Detectives began scrutinizing Anthony Miller's story. At first, he was painted as the shattered survivor, a man who had lost everything in one night. But soon, cracks appeared in his account. Anthony claimed he had been in the basement when the shooting started. But investigators noted there were no traces of blood on the basement stairs or the wine rack he said he had been using. The blood on his clothes, meanwhile, wasn't from rushing to help his family. It was spatter consistent with being present at the time of the shots. Then came the financial records. Though Anthony had won millions, investigators discovered the money was disappearing at an alarming rate. Lavish cars, risky investments, gambling trips to Las Vegas, Anthony had burned through a shocking amount. Worse, he had taken out a series of high-value life insurance policies on his wife and children just months before the murders, worth over $5 million. Friends who had once envied him now told detectives that Anthony had grown increasingly desperate. He'd say things like, "Winning ruined my life," one recalled. Another claimed Anthony had confided, "The money's not enough. It'll never be enough." Still, investigators couldn't ignore other possibilities. Anthony had been targeted before small thefts, threatening letters, people trying to scam him. The night of the murders, a neighbor swore they saw a black SUV idling near the house. Could someone else have come to collect what they felt they were owed? But the most chilling evidence came from Anthony's own security system. Although the cameras had been disabled, tech experts pulled fragments of data from the hard drive. The system had been shut down manually, from inside the house. The timestamp? Just 17 minutes before the murders. And the only person who had the code to the system was Anthony himself. By the third week of investigation, the narrative shifted. The lucky lottery winner who seemed cursed by fate was no longer viewed as a victim. Detectives began to see him as the prime suspect in the slaughter of his own family. But then came a twist no one saw coming, because Anthony Miller's story was about to unravel in a way that shocked even the most hardened investigators. The twist came when detectives dug deeper into Anthony Miller's secret life. While the public still saw him as the grieving survivor of an unimaginable tragedy, investigators uncovered a man living a double existence. Bank statements revealed wire transfers to offshore accounts, millions quietly moved out of the country. Even more alarming, detectives found payments to a woman in Florida, a former cocktail waitress named Vanessa Ruiz. When questioned, Vanessa admitted she had been in a relationship with Anthony for nearly 2 years. She thought he was separated from his wife and claimed he promised her a new life once things were settled. Investigators later confirmed Anthony had bought her a condo, a car, and had even introduced her to friends as his fiancée, all while Laura, his wife, was still alive. The motive was suddenly crystal clear. Anthony wasn't just drowning in debt, he wanted freedom. Freedom from his marriage, from responsibility to his children, and from the fortune he had recklessly squandered. The insurance payout on his family's deaths would cover everything and fund his escape with Vanessa. But detectives needed more than motive, they needed proof. They got it from ballistics. The bullets pulled from the victims matched a 9mm handgun registered to Anthony. When asked, Anthony claimed the gun had been stolen months ago, yet no theft report was ever filed. Even worse for him, a gun-cleaning kit with traces of blood was found hidden in his garage. Then came the most damning evidence of all. Investigators discovered Anthony's fingerprints on the disabled security panel. He had personally shut down the cameras minutes before the massacre. When confronted with the evidence, Anthony's calm facade cracked. In the interrogation room, he broke down screaming, insisting he was being framed, insisting someone else must have done it. But no matter how loud he shouted, the evidence spoke louder. The picture was no longer of a cursed man who lost everything. It was of a man who had everything and chose greed over family, lust over loyalty, money over blood. Anthony Miller, the man the world once called the luckiest lottery winner alive, was about to stand trial as one of the most cold-blooded family annihilators in modern history. The trial of Anthony Miller was nothing short of a national spectacle. Courtrooms overflowed with reporters, true crime podcasters, and curious locals who wanted to witness the downfall of the man who had once been celebrated as America's luckiest winner. The prosecution painted Anthony as a man corrupted by fortune. They laid out his financial ruin, his secret mistress, and the insurance policies he had quietly taken out on his wife and children. They showed jurors the receipts for the luxury cars, the gambling trips, and the transfers to Vanessa Ruiz. Piece by piece, they dismantled the illusion of the grieving widower and revealed a man who saw his family as obstacles to wealth. The most haunting evidence was the 911 call. Played for the jury, Anthony's voice trembled as he claimed to have found his family already gone. But forensic experts testified that his tone didn't match the panic of a man stumbling onto a massacre. It matched someone performing shock, rehearsed and hollow. The defense argued Anthony was a victim of circumstance, that his wealth made him a target, that someone else had broken into the home. They pointed to the mysterious black SUV seen by a neighbor, but when pressed, they had no suspects, no evidence, just speculation. Then the prosecution called Vanessa Ruiz to the stand. Nervous, voice shaking, she admitted Anthony promised her they'd be together soon and told her not to worry about money. He said he'd have millions coming in, she testified, tears streaking her face. The jurors watched her intently, the betrayal written in every word. But the moment that broke the courtroom came when Anthony's own sister took the stand. Fighting back sobs, she said, "He didn't just kill his family. He killed the people who loved him most. My brother traded his soul for money." Through it all, Anthony sat expressionless, sometimes smirking, sometimes shaking his head, as if the world misunderstood him. But the evidence was undeniable. The life insurance, the disabled cameras, the murder weapon, all pointing straight at him. By the time closing arguments ended, the jury didn't just see Anthony as unlucky. They saw him for what he was, a man who had won the lottery twice, only to gamble it all away and then try to cash out by slaughtering his own family. The only question left was whether the jury would show mercy, or whether they would give Anthony Miller the ultimate punishment. The jury deliberated for less than 8 hours. When they returned, the courtroom was so silent that even the sound of chairs shifting echoed. Anthony Miller stood as the foreman read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. The words struck like a gavel through his life. Anthony didn't flinch. He only stared forward, jaw tight, as if still convinced he could talk his way out of fate. But there would be no escape. The judge handed down the maximum penalty: life in prison without the possibility of parole. The man who had beaten the odds twice with the lottery now faced odds he could never escape spending the rest of his life behind bars. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Headlines flashed across the nation. From jackpot to judgment. The lottery killer, and luck runs out for Anthony Miller. The story captured something grotesquely fascinating. How wealth meant to lift a family out of struggle became the very reason they were destroyed. In prison, Anthony was treated not as a celebrity, but as a pariah. Inmates mocked him, calling him lucky, sneering at the irony. Some even taunted him by asking, "Got any numbers for us?" He withdrew, refusing interviews, refusing visitors, even Vanessa Ruiz, the mistress he once promised the world to. She vanished from the spotlight, her name forever linked to the scandal. The Miller mansion was sold, its walls stripped bare, but neighbors say the echoes of that night still linger. Parents point to the house when warning their children that money doesn't equal happiness. The pool where Anthony's kids once laughed now sits empty, a cracked, hollow shell of a dream turned nightmare. Anthony's surviving relatives never forgave him. His sister, who testified against him, said in an interview, he thought winning made him special. But money doesn't change who you are, it just makes the monster inside louder. And that became the enduring legacy of the case. Anthony Miller wasn't cursed by luck. He was cursed by greed. The man who won the lottery twice ended up losing everything the family who loved him, the fortune he craved, and the freedom he took for granted. In the end, Anthony Miller's story wasn't about luck at all. It was about how even the brightest fortune can hide the darkest soul.